Okay, our circumference for Bob is 44 1/4 at the waist. You okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay. So the circumference at the xiphoid process, I'm a little high right there. The xiphoid is, it's a little bit twisted, but basically it is 43 5/8. 43 5/8. Okay, I'm going to grab our ml gauge. The ASIS ml is 15.5. We'll say 14 7/8 at the waist and 15 at the xiphoid. So essentially 15 and both. But we'll do 14 7/8 and 15. Now our heights are going to come into play again as well. I'm going to come over here. All right, Bob, if you'll do the honors on this. Let me start over just for in a second. Okay, so we have, he put the distal aspect of this tape measure at his symphysis pubis. Now we're going to go all the way up. And wow. Okay, so when he is supine, sternal notch to the symphysis pubis is 26.5, which is already more than it was in standing, but we'll go over that in a minute. And we'll take our other shorter measurements here. So we'll go now from the waist. I'm going to find his waist here. Waist to xiphoid is 6 again, so that's the same. And waist to sternal notch is 16.5. Now let's take our 3 charts that we just created and compare them side by side. So we're just let's analyze our diagrams. This is Bob's seated picture, and the measurements we could take of Bob in the seated posture were their circumferences at his ASIS, his waist, and his xiphoid. The MLs we could also take. Okay, so this number says 45 3/4. The waist, that's the ASIS. The waist is 48. The xiphoid is 44.5. Okay, let's compare those numbers, just those three numbers, to what Bob is when he stood. So he's 45 3/4 when he sits at his ASIS. Over here we have Bob standing. He is 43.5 at his ASIS when he's standing. At his waist, he's 46, and if you compare that to his waist when he sits, that's 48. So that's a 2-inch difference just right there. It is a 2.25-inch difference at the ASIS. His xiphoid is a little less of a difference, but it's still a difference. And we have 44.5 with the seated position at the xiphoid for a circumference. And when the person stands, we have 43.5. So that was an inch difference, which is significant when our goal is to help make sure a brace is snug. Now, in the supine position, we actually have Bob's ASIS as 44, which is actually a larger circumference right here. The waist, however, is different again. So Bob's standing circumference at the waist, which is 2 inches smaller than it is in the seated position, again almost reduces in size by 2 inches. So we went from, there's a 4-inch difference from the seated to the supine posture, okay, position. And the xiphoid overall doesn't change too much from the standing to the supine, but we can also point to the ASIS difference. When Bob is seated, we have 45 3/4 down to 44 in circumference in the supine position. So that's a difference of almost 2 inches. So we changed 4 inches at our waist and almost 2 inches at the ASIS in terms of circumference, and you can only imagine what that means for a brace. If you put the brace on in the seated position, okay, the person stands up, they get smaller, then the brace can migrate up and down, okay? Then they go back to the seated posture, it can migrate up, and that's when you can see, you know, a brace migrate up into the axillary region here or into the neck like we saw earlier. Now that's just the circumferences. When Bob is sitting, his sternal notch to his symphysis pubis was 20. When he stood, his sternal notch to his symphysis pubis was 25. And when he was supine, it went to 26.5. So that is from Bob in a seated posture to Bob in a supine posture is 6.5 inches difference. Now, people don't usually wear their braces when they are laying down. So it might be more accurate to compare Bob standing to Bob sitting. So if we have a brace that looks good on Bob in a standing position, if we want to help keep Bob more straight, you know, there is an argument that can be made that if he's longer, if he's straighter in the standing position or in the supine position, if we want to keep him more straight, we might want to try to put that brace on in those two positions versus putting it on in a seated posture where he's shorter and in a relaxed posture, in which we called that X minus Y in the video.